Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, welcome back. In the previous lecture, we talked about the various ways we can communicate without words. But then, when we communicate, we use words. Other things which we have called non-verbals, they complement our verbal messages. But what is very noteworthy is we actually use words, and then there are other things that come to our help. In this connection, let us talk about how when we make use of words, what are the various criteria, what are the various nuances that also add to the meaning, and we call that, we study that in paralanguage. When we use words, words actually create language. But then how to deliver words so that meaning becomes clear? You might have come across many people and you at times feel quite jealous of them because of their voice. Now, does voice also matter in communication? Everyone's voice is different. No two people's voice are alike. Some people speak very high, some people speak low, some people have very harsh tones. But then, in order to meet, in order to carry out day-to-day activities as well as business transactions, we have to see that our voice matters. We have already talked about how when you are depressed, your voice is different. When you are happy, your voice becomes distinct. The language of voice is very important. Voice, as we all know, is a gift of God. Not everyone can have as good a voice as that of Big B. But then everyone's voice is unique. Everyone's voice is distinct. There is a distinct quality. Even though we do not have a good voice, the quality of voice can always be changed. Our voice carries intentional and unintentional emotions and messages. Imagine you are tired, but then you have to participate in a meeting, or you have to take part in a conference. Even though you are ill and you are going to participate, you can realize how your emotion of suffering becomes a part of your voice. You do not want that. You try your level best to overcome, but then you cannot. As we say, fancy cannot cheat so well. Your emotions cannot be hidden, and that becomes a part of your voice. Sometimes because of depression, despair, sorrow, you are not able to articulate well. But then, in order to be successful, in order to make our message heard and received. We have to ensure that whatever we say is clear. Clarity is the hallmark of all communication, and clarity can ensure well only when words are spoken properly. But what? You may find a person suffering or a person who is ill, he may not speak each words very distinctly, because when you speak, it actually requires a sort of effort. Children might have read that when you produce sounds, you produce both vowel sounds as well as consonant sounds. And in the production of both vowel sounds and consonant sounds, some efforts are used. It is actually a process, and this process, the process of say speech making or the process of sound making, it actually goes through 3 stages. And the first stage is articulatory, respiratory. So, what happens is, it is an exchange of your breaths. Whether you produce a vowel sound or a consonant sound, you will find that the air passes, and the air passes through different channels. There are different channels. There is a windpipe, there is an uvula, there are nasal pipes and all, and through these, with the help of lips, you actually create sounds. And again, if you go deep, you will also find that there are several ways also when in the production of certain sounds, your lips are either semi-rounded, half rounded. So, there are different ways. With the help of your say teeth, you create certain sounds like dentals, sometimes fricatives. So, this is actually a process, and so when you are making use of voice, you have to see that all you want to say is clear, and this clarity can be studied under articulation. If things that you want to say are not candid, it will not create a good impression on your audience. Hence, it becomes quite important that you make each of your sound distinctly heard, and for that a little effort is required. The other thing which is important in terms of voice is, in terms of speech making, is the problems of pronunciation. All of us, because we come from different backgrounds, different countries, and as we are living in a global world today, people from different countries have different habits, and they have different pronunciations also. And no two people, I mean Asians have a different way of pronouncing things, Americans have a different way of pronouncing things. You will find that there has been certain observation that Americans appear to be as transparent in terms of pronunciation, but in the Western world at times their pronunciation becomes very difficult. But then, since we are to communicate, it becomes quite significant to understand that we are communicating for others, and if our messages are not being heard and understood, there is no use of our message being conveyed. Hence, voice has an important role to play. So, when we talk about the language of voice, we also, because many of us do not have English as our first language. In many countries, English is a second language. In some countries, it may be third language also. So, what happens is, we actually translate it from our mother tongue to a foreign tongue, and in this process, we actually create certain lapses, and that may at times result in terms of certain failures. And remember, when you are going to talk to people who are strangers or people from different countries, for you it becomes difficult, because Either you are not able to listen properly the sounds that the other person is making, or your sounds are not being taken that seriously, hence there becomes a communication lapse. Now, what are the important features of voice? As I said, voice is every man's own quality, and we try to emulate the voice of celebrated speakers. We may not at times be successful in emulating them. You might have come across the examples of how even many famous orators, say for example Lincoln, Churchill, they also had the problems in terms of their voice. Some of them used to lisp, some of them had certain problems, but later on, because of particular training, because of specific training and because of specific learning, they utilize their voices for the common good. Now, what actually are the features of voice? The first is quality. Now, this quality, every voice will have its own quality. As I said in the beginning, that either you speak too loud or you speak a little loud. You speak too low or you speak too high. You speak so low that people are not able to understand. That is why when you go to address a gathering, or many speakers go to address a gathering, they first check the audibility level and they try to ensure that they are audible. The first thing here to be taken into consideration is you should neither be too loud nor be too slow. So, try to check your voice in the beginning. If you are addressing a large gathering, it becomes very difficult, of course, to control. But then nowadays you have microphones, but even with microphones, because of the quality of some people's voices, things are not clear. Many people, even when they speak, the microphone can enhance the quality, but many people are in the habit of eating up their words, so clarity becomes a problem. So, quality is very important. What sort of voice do you have? How you can make a qualitative use of your voice. Then is volume, how loud or how slow, how high, how low. Then comes the rate. When we speak, many people you will find they are very fast, and if you are fast, there is actually a tendency that people who speak too fast, they forget something in the middle, and then the entire show becomes a damn squiff. So, it is very important that we need to adjust our rate in consonance with the background of our listeners. You may not be addressing every now and then people who are already elevated, people who are very qualified, people have a good knowledge. You may at times also have to address people whose background is different, who are not as qualified, people of different age groups. Hence, somewhere or the other you have to go for something where you can make your voice heard, and you can also ensure that your rate is proper and that is also in line with the understanding of your audience. Then comes pronunciation, and then we will also talk about silence and pauses. So, there are certain faults in our voices. Some of us, you will find, they actually suffer from the problem of throatiness. So, when a person has this problem, their voice actually results of a deep resonance in their voice. There is actually a deep resonance in their voice, and the voice becomes very throaty. Maybe at times it becomes difficult for the other person to understand. Then there is another, that is breathiness. It is actually a result of the passage of too much air through vocal cords. We have already talked about how when we make a sound, the air passes, and the air passes through vocal cords, through windpipe. No? So, if there is too much of passage of air, the voice tends to become, or the voice tends to suffer from breathiness. Then some people also have the problem of nasalization, and this problem results because the air is released through nose. Of course, there are some sounds like na, anga, all these sounds are nasal sounds, but then some people, because they are not able to, so their voices at times becomes nasalized. Then there is another feature, that is harshness, where the flow of air is uninhibited, and that also poses problem to the listeners or to the audience. Some people, because of the lazy lip and the movements of the jaw, they actually, their voices become muffled and the clarity level is impeded. Now, if you are suffering from all these, nothing in the world can not have a remedy. I mean, everything in the world has a remedy. You may at times find that there are people whose voices are often cracked, whose voices are often muffled, but then if they decide, if they train themselves in a way, if they speak a little bit slow, they may also be heard. There are several examples, as I said, and you also come across several people who are suffering from these problems of muffling voices and all, but they can make it, they can make proper use of, but then that requires proper training. Of course, the last one, which is hoarseness and which results out of inflammation of larynx, this actually is the result of a medical problem, and for that you need to consult a speech therapist or people who are specialized in terms of voice, and you can consult them and can find the best remedy. Now, when you are speaking or when you are articulating, what happens? There are certain things that we come across. Some people, as I said, they tend to be too fast, and when they tend to be too fast, they eat up some of the words, and it creates problems for the audience. So, first is that you decide that you will speak the words very distinctly, very clearly, and for that, if you need to be a little bit slow, there is no problem. Nothing is going to happen, if you are very fast and you want to feel that by being fast you will be considered a successful speaker, I think you are under a hallucination. There is no use of being fast if your audience are not able to understand your words. So, care here is to be a little bit slow, in order that the words that you are speaking can be heard by others. It is advisable that you avoid chopping, slurring, mumbling sounds. There are many people, you will find that when they speak, they are suffering from the problems of ums, and all these actually create a sort of disturbance in terms of your speech. So, you can always improve your voice. You can always, through CA training, nowadays there are several ways available. Most of you students, you are actually making use of your cell phones, but then you are using it for different purposes. Why can't you record your own voice, your own short speech, and you can see where you are missing, where there is a lapse, and then you can try it again, you can rehearse. A little bit of rehearsal actually can create a lot of changes in your voice. So, the need is that you need to record your sounds. The problem actually occurs when you come across a word which is difficult. Not all words are so familiar to you, not all words are so easy. So, you come across some difficult words at times, maybe that you do not know the pronunciation of that particular word also. So, here you can make use of the dictionary or the thesaurus, and if you know the phonetic notations, you yourself can find how this word can be clearly pronounced. There is no need that you should feel embarrassed or you should feel shy. The entire life is meant for learning. So, you will find when you speak fast, the word ought to at times becomes oughta, didn't becomes didn't, don't know. Many people often are in the habit of saying don't know. Now this actually may insult speakers also. Hence, the care that you should take is try to speak each word very distinctly and there will no problem. Many people also say want to as wanna, want to be as wanna be, and there is problem in articulation. You see, when you speak you have an idea, and this idea you can articulate well for the benefit of others. If you have the ideas need to be articulated, and in order to articulate well, you need to see that you are clear, you are audible, your voice should not appear to be very imposing, it should not appear to be very pleasant. If you speak too fast or if you speak very harshly, then maybe it may sound very unpleasant. So, what you need to do is you need to speak in a fashion that not only do others understand, but at the same time they also enjoy it. After all, for whom have you travelled too much, and for whom have you struggled, for whom have you prepared so much of material? It may go waste if you are not able to deliver it properly. Now we come to the volume. As I said, when you speak something or the other party speaks something, it has to be heard. We call that audibility. You need to be audible, and volume is related to the degree of loudness or the softness of voice. You will sometimes feel how pleasant is his or her voice. Now, the way he or she utilizes his or her voice, that actually attracts you. Many people have got very attractive voices, and you find that you are being captivated. You know, in earlier days when there were no television, where you couldn't see people, people were actually accustomed to listen to radio, and the voices used to be used to haunt in your ears. Say for example, when you listen to either BBC English or BBC Hindi or BBC Bangla service, you will find what a beautiful, what a sort of pleasant voice is there. And you actually may travel thousands and thousands of miles to go and listen to such voices. Dear friends, you also can have such voices. The need is that you make proper use of the volume. The voice levels may vary depending upon audience. When you are speaking to a small audience where there are 20 or 30 people, there is no need to shout, there is no need to speak too high. But then when you are speaking to a crowd having 100 or 150, of course the level goes. But remember, nowadays in an age when we are talking about all sorts of gadgets, you have several facilities at your disposal, and then depending upon the room and the capacity, you can always adjust your voice according to the acoustics of the room. If you speak too loud, of course your voice will crack. So it is better to maintain a level. Now you will find many good and celebrated speakers, when they begin, how they begin the first sentence. Maybe they are not too high, not too loud, They speak at a very rational pace. But as they proceed, you will find their levels, the degree, the volume rises. Moreover, have you not met people who continue to speak just in one tone? Don't they tend to be monotonous? They tend to be monotonous. Hence, what one needs to do is, one actually needs to understand that there can be certain rises and falls in your voice. We actually call them intonation. While you need to speak not too loud, not too slow, but in between, where there is a proper cooperation, where there is a proper connection between you and your audience, see to it that your voice never appears to be very imposing or very harsh. At times you may also wonder, when we communicate and when we give a public speech, is there a difference the way we use speed or the pace or the rate? You see, if you speak too fast or you speak too slow, you will find the delivery becomes often faulty. Speaking too low may not be understood by people who are either on the last benches or in the last row. Speaking too loud, even though it may reach the people at the last rung, but may appear very unpleasant to people who are sitting at the front row. So, both the ways are dangerous. Hence, the medium way, the madhyam marga, that is very important, and you should try to have a sort of connection. You try to create a sort of balance, that you are neither too loud nor too slow. You can decide the pace, or you can decide the rate of your words as per your audience, not only the number but also the background, because it is very difficult to understand the background of our audience since we do not know all of them. Hence, the best remedy is to think of them as ordinary people, people who are having little bit of education and people who can understand. If you go with this view, I think most of the time you become successful. When you read something, when you read a book, you find you have a dictionary, and you can also always, when you feel, you can stop. But when you are talking to a group of people or to a crowd, there is no looking back. There is no retreat button. There is no back button. Hence, all of us have to be careful that we create a balance so that it is beneficial both to them as well as to you. Now, you may ask how it is beneficial to you. Suppose you are going to give a talk for 20 minutes or say for 30 minutes. If you speak too fast, you will run short of material. But then, if you maintain a proper level, proper volume, proper rate of words, you will have more material and you will never run short of ideas nor of content. You might have heard many people saying that after 10 or 15 minutes, I do not know what should I say or what should I speak. This is actually the problem which arises because of poor preparation, because of poor prediction, because of poor anticipation of the crowd. Hence, it is quite important that you think well in advance about your crowd and how you are going to manage, because we will also talk about how time management plays a very important role and in making a communication very effective. Now, as I said, if a person starts in one tone and in one pace and he continues throughout, what will happen? Imagine yourself sitting in a classroom where the exponent or the teacher speaks just in one tone. He does not move. He does not bring a change in his volume. He does not bring a change by creating certain ups and downs in his voice. Tends to become boring, tends to make people sleep, and you will find many people, they actually have put their heads down on their desks. This is clear indication that as a speaker you are not successful. Hence, please add a variety, because this variety may result in bringing even these sleeping people back to life, and that can be done only with the help of your voice. Remember, even when you are in the middle of your speech or you are in the middle of your talk, and if the matter is complex, and if you become a little bit slow and then interpret, then perhaps you will find that the task becomes easier not only for you but also for the crowd. Hence, be wise and make use of pitch variations. Now, what are these pitch variations? You will find that when you speak, most of the time when people have asked me how many words per minute should we speak, of course that varies from one group of crowd to another, but on an average if you speak 140 to 150 words per minute, that actually is a balance and people can understand well. However, you will find when you are addressing an elite crowd, your speed or your rate goes higher, but this is not true in all situations and in all circumstances. Hence, all you need to do is to go the line of speaking at least 130 and 150 words per minute. Though you cannot calculate, but by regular practice of speaking and rehearsing, you will get used to, and speaking to crowds will not become difficult, rather it will become an enjoying experience. Now, when you talk about pitch variations, is there a variation in the pitch? Of course. All that you speak are sentences, and the sentences, they comprise words, and since sentences comprise words, there are many words which have got some emotions. When you speak sentences, you speak all sorts of sentences. Sometimes you want to ask, sometimes you want to suggest, sometimes you want to give a statement, sometimes you want to query, sometimes you want to request. And in doing all these, that actually requires a sort of change in the tone and the tenor. Our vocal cords, as I have said earlier, they vibrate in the production of change. In the production of sounds, they actually change, and these pitch changes, they are called inflections. Say for example, if I say, come here, go there, bring me some tea, will you bring me some tea? Now, you will find that the stress level shifts from one word to another. Sometimes you ask a question, what's the time? Now, you will find we do not say, what is the time? We cannot say like this. Otherwise, the emotion that you want to convey is defeated. Hence, we need pitch variations, because these pitch variations, they convey feelings, and feelings can be conveyed or expressed well when we make use of pitch variations. These pitch variations, often you will find, if you have seen many singers, and when they are having their practice sessions, if you record that, you will find that can be gauged, that can be measured on a scale. Nowadays, your voice, whatever I am speaking, that also might have being gazed by a machine, how my voice sometimes goes up, how it comes down. So there are variations, and these variations appear, and these variations actually add to the meaning. A speech without variation becomes monotonous. That is why a person who speaks just in one tone, you all of you might have come across poetry recitations and all. So there also you might have seen how when you recite, you actually give stress on certain words. You also might have seen when in any play or any movie, when characters, they actually speak dialogues, they also bring these nuances and variations and create a sort of effect, and that effect is likely to result in how the audience react to it. Dear friends, your voice has got such possibilities. All you need to do is you need to explore, you need to make use of, you need actually to bring variety and make your talk interesting, and that is possible. Now, when you are doing that, you also have to be aware of your pronunciations. Since we Asians, particularly Indians, we come from different states, and every state has a different sort of climate, and that is why we say our pronunciation changes every 5 miles. Language changes every 5 miles, and since all of us are using English as a second language, the impact of our first language is too much on our second language. That is why we are not able to make proper use of certain sounds, and that is why there are certain lapses when we speak. But then you need not worry that much about these problems, because our main focus is to express, and express in a manner that is lucid, express in a manner that is enjoyable. For that, we need not imitate either Americans or Britishers, but then let us see if we can follow the received pronunciation, because we cannot become people having a sort of nest for pronunciation like the native speakers, but all you need to speak is to be clear. For that, please follow received pronunciation, and when you are going to follow this received pronunciation, you need to take into consideration the various stresses that are there on words. You will find words have different classes. When we use a noun or use an adjective or use a verb or use an adverb, all these classes of verbs, you will find they have different stresses, and it depends upon the speaker how he makes use of these stresses. These stresses can also be in sentences, as I have said, depending upon the emotion. No, people often, when there is a holiday, they actually very cheerfully say, "Oh, it's a Sunday today," isn't it? So they actually not only express their emotion, but at the same time the way they put a stress. Maybe we may not be that perfect, but at the same time we try to add meaning to whatever we speak, and that is possible with subtle nuances of intonation which we can practice. Most of us, without practice, cannot make proper stresses at proper places. It is advisable to put stresses at the right syllables. Every word you will find has got certain syllables, and these syllables, just in some of your classes you might have read about that every word can be divided into certain syllables, and on which syllable you have to put stress, that is also given. You can make use of a good dictionary, and the same way you can do while you are having sentences or you are having specific use of stress in terms of sentences. But remember, even if you are not able to do that with the help of a dictionary, it's better to listen to some TV channels where you find you can learn. You know, much of the stresses and much of the sounds you can learn very clearly the way they are spoken on certain TV channels. For example, in India, if you watch some program of NDTV or Times Now, there are some good anchors, there are some good speakers from whom you can learn, but then make it a habit. You know, all listening is not mere hearing, but when you are listening, as we will discuss in listening class, listening is very important, fine. But then if there is a sort of environment around you, you may be able to gather right sounds, right words, right sentences. And sometimes, as I said, in order to bring a variety, you can modulate your voice to express intended meaning. Say, if a student comes to the class when he or she is late, you will find the way he expresses, he asks, he seeks the permission of the teacher, may I come in, sir, though I am late, sir. Fine. I mean, when you speak that, you are also expressing a meaning. When you ask a question, you are expressing the meaning. When you are giving a suggestion, take care, it's evening now. Fine. Hurry up, it's time to go. Please wind up your lecture, you are perhaps moving beyond time. Now, whenever you speak all these things, you find there are certain meanings which are already implicit in it. So, modulate your voice to express intended meaning. Usually, you will find articles, prepositions. For example, we say the, a, and, to. I mean, all these words, all these classes, all these parts of speech, conjunctions, auxiliary verbs and personal pronouns, they do not take stress. We never say, we never give a stress on the, fine, we do not give a stress on to, these are prepositions, but other than that, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, as we have said, they actually tend to take stress. You know, the entire sound system, even though it may appear to be very difficult, but if you practice it, if you create certain ups and downs, rise and fall in the pitch of your voice, you will find you appear to be very distinct. And in the beginning I had been saying that everyone's voice is distinct. You know, an ordinary person speaks and you speak because you know how and how much stress is to be given. Naturally, you will appear to be more distinct and you will appear to be more understanding, and you will also appear to convey your emotions well. Most of the time, when you make use of falling tone, especially these are in the cases of when you give a command. For example, bring me a cup of tea. Oh, where had you been? Where had you been? So, you will find that there is a falling tone, and sometimes we make a request, would you like to have a cup of tea with me? No, not at all. Oh yes. What's the time? Is it time to wind up? Isn't it? You are actually making use of tags. So, in such cases, your tone suddenly rises. Dear friends, you will believe and you will rest assured that even pauses and silences, they also have a great role to play in your speech. Now, what are these pauses? How to give pauses? You know, if a person speaks continuously and if he is very fast, if he does not give any pause, then what happens? He appears to be very trite. That is why these pauses are actually short silences in speech. For example, we may say, listen what I say. What I say is important, but what you say also cannot be refuted. Now, you will find when I speak these sentences, there are certain gaps between two words, but sometimes when we have to express, when we have to give a longer pause, that becomes silence. For example, somebody dies and you say, oh, he died. And after that, there is a silence. And now that silence actually adds to the meaning. These pauses separate one unit of thought, because when you speak, your entire speech is actually a combination of several things. And when you make a movement from one unit of thought to another, you make pauses. And finally, when you feel that now you are towards the end of the lecture, what you do is you actually signify, the voice suddenly starts coming down, and you also give certain signposts, and that also in the form of words. But remember, both in the beginning and in the end of the speech, it is always advisable to begin with a pause. For example, when you begin, say, hello friends, today I am here to give you a talk on the importance of vocal characteristics. And when we come to the end of the speech, we say, and now to conclude, let me say, and you will find the gaps, and these will actually help a great to our audience, and you will find that you have been able to make proper use of the pauses. It is very important here to quote what Mark Twain says, the right word may be effective, but no word was ever as effective as a rightly timed pause. But remember, pause should appear to be only a pause. If pause becomes longer, it becomes silence. But then, is silence not important in speech? Of course. Silence is also important. When you are making modulations, when you are making changes, sometimes you stop, and you will find that silence is also interpreted. Silence is a non-verbal cue, I said in my previous lecture. It is a non-verbal cue, and silence has a meaning. In certain cultures, silence means approval. In some, it means disapproval. In some, it means disagreement. But when you are making use of voice and making use of silence, it also is beneficial as a speaker. When I maintain a little bit of silence, I actually get time to think of what I have spoken. And as a listener, my silence is helpful to you, because you start connecting, you start digesting all that I have said. So silence also helps in thought process. It also helps when you say something and you become silent, you are looking at the person's reaction, and then you actually get some meaning. At times when you become silent, either in speech or in any activity, you have actually a time for introspection. You start thinking within, you start looking within, you start looking beyond. Every silence has a benefit that after every silence there is a time. It actually gives you time to make certain decisions. But in the midst of your speech, in the midst of your talk, when you either pause or you make use of silence, that is very intentional. Silence has a meaning, and this meaning can be interpreted in several ways. But then at times it is always better to be silent than to speak too much and to mean less. Let us conclude this session by quoting what the famous Pythagoras says, silence is better than unmeaning words. After every silence, there is a new beginning. After every silence, there is a new initiation of a thought process. After every silence, you will find there is a new generation. I hope, though we are going to conclude this session and going to be silent, but this silence will again bring me back and bring you back, and we will connect, because silence connects. Thank you very much.